Hello, hello, and welcome to the multisensory approaches of teaching literacy. So, I could not be present and live for this understanding and screening learning disabilities with Africa Dyslexia organization. However, I still felt this information was still really important to share with the community out there. So I am going to give you a robust tutorial on what multisensory teaching and approaches look like for teaching literacy. So let's hop on into this presentation. All right, so the agenda today, we are going to discuss what is multisensory teaching and learning. What does that mean? Who are students that could benefit from multisensory learning? And multisensory approaches that work. What does this look like? How do we know it works? And then we're going to really delve into some structured literacy and multisensory teaching tutorials. And these are things that I have actually used with my students and I have seen success. So that is what we're going to cover in today's presentation. But first things first, I want to get all of you on my mailing list. So what this means is you can hold your phone up to this QR code and it will land you on my website, which is www.thinkdyslexia.me. Now, you will be able to read a little bit about who I am, my experience, my context to dyslexia. You will also be able to download a free PDF, 3 surprising ways to support your dyslexic child's journey. And you can also shoot me a message if you're interested in some consultation work or some tutoring. So definitely be sure to get on my mailing list. I definitely send out educational emails, any updates about services that we are providing as an educational consulting and tutoring company. So be sure to do that. All right, so you're probably wondering, if you have not seen me or know my work, you want to know, why am I important? Why am I giving this presentation? As I always state in my own personal journey of listening to podcasts, going to presentations, I can't really take something seriously unless I know who that person is and why they're credible in that field. So I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of who I am. So I've been a special educator for over a decade. So special education here in the United States means I work with kids that have learning disabilities. Now, I have a dual master's in elementary education and special education. And I really honestly began my career at a private dyslexic school. That was when I had on-the-job training, learning about what dyslexia was, what language-based learning differences are. I had no idea what any of that was in my graduate program. I also trained with an Orton-Gillingham fellow and became certified at the associate level in the academy in 2014. So I have been an Orton-Gillingham trained practitioner for about 7 or 8 years. I taught 4th grade for 3 years, 3rd, 4th grade for a year, 7th grade for a year, 8th grade for 4 years. And I recently just left my position as a learning specialist at a private Quaker school where I was on the administrative team, and I would coach teachers and parents and students along their disability journey. And the teachers, it was more so educating them on the various learning differences. I also worked in a nonprofit that focused on inclusive education for school districts and teachers needing to know how to include all learners, not just the quote smart ones, but all learners. And now I'm a full-time business owner, self-employed, doing contract work with other educational companies out there, but also really honing in on my tutoring and educational consulting business. So that is a little bit about myself. I do have 2 kids. My husband is a teacher. I have several pets. I reside in Maryland, which is not too far from Washington, D.C., for those of you who are not as familiar with the states in the United States. So that is a little bit about myself. And I will delve into some resources at the end of this presentation of what Think Dyslexia can offer you as a school district, as a school, as an administrator, as a parent, and so on and so forth. So let's delve on in. You may be aware of what dyslexia is, but I always have to bring that context to the beginning of these presentations. So dyslexia is. This is taken from the International Dyslexia Association. So if you were not familiar with that website, please get familiar with it. It is an excellent resource They at one point, I think, had free videos on demand during the pandemic for parents to really know how to support their children because it was virtual schooling. So it's such a robust place to get resources and just knowledge about dyslexia and other language-based learning differences, but more so dyslexia. So this definition is like a snippet from it. So it says dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. So it's so important for people to realize that this is not a disease. It is not something that, there's nothing wrong with you or your child. It's just how your brain is wired. It's just different. And it is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. So that is really the superficial aspect of what people see and think with dyslexia. They think it's floating letters. They think, oh, you can't read. It's really more all-encompassing. That's another presentation within itself to talk about the social emotional impacts and the self-esteem of how undiagnosed dyslexia can really impact, kids, young adults, and adults. So this picture over here to the right shows you two pictures of a brain. So on the left, it says non-impaired reader. So it shows you three areas in the brain that when you're teaching kids to learn how to read, or if you're giving them language, I mean, really kids hear language from the time they're in the womb. Reading is not innate. That's something you have to explicitly teach. But if you have a typical brain, you see these three areas: word analysis, word from integrated, and articulation, word processing. These areas light up when language is being introduced. And this is really more so for the typical brain where reading does not, it's not a challenge, versus on the right, a reader with dyslexia, they only have this one area: articulation, word analysis. And if all three are not firing, then it's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to understand, what to read, how to decode, how to process that language, which is so important. Why a multisensory approach is so critical, and why structured literacy in the science of reading is really the best bet for kids with dyslexia. So you're probably wondering, what is multisensory teaching and learning? So basically, I'm going to simplify it for you. It's this visual. You want to make sure that you're hitting all facets of the senses with students. So for example, some teachers in the old school mindset might think that if they are lecturing and if a child is doodling, they are not paying attention. Well, that's simply not true. Now, it could be true because maybe they find the content boring, but that's another conversation. So it could be, in order for them to get the information, maybe they're drawing what you're talking about to make connections, or maybe they have to focus on something else to focus on what is being said. Some people are more visual learners. I'm a visual learner. So as you see, because in the previous slides I had words, but I have a lot of pictures, because pictures for me help me kind of put in my mind what something means. So there are visual learners, there are tactile learners, there are kinesthetic learners. So this right here says touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste. Now, obviously, we're not going to taste something as we're teaching reading, or maybe we might, but it really is all about getting all senses firing. So if you go back to that brain, those three areas will make those connections. And, the earlier the intervention, the better. And so when I taught fourth grade, we would do things, where they would see it, they would hear it, and they would say it, and they would move it. And it just really worked for their brain to really get all that information. So who benefits? You're probably wondering, who benefits from multisensory teaching and learning? Well, the simple answer is everyone. If you can have a differentiated lesson in ways that you're like, okay, my kids that can just sit there and take notes, boom, that's easy. That's like, that's like the top where I can say that's the easiest thing to plan a lesson for. But it's the kids who get squirmy. It's the kids who need constant repetition. It's the kids who need chunking. That's where you've got to incorporate the multisensory approach. You have to incorporate moving. You have to incorporate dancing, music, anything. And when you do that, that's what makes a fantastic teacher, which then benefits all learners. So I had a teacher once that I was working with who, from my experience, would only teach through one way. And it was really difficult for the students who struggled because it was that teacher's way or the highway. And what was challenging was this teacher wasn't very reflective in looking at the fact that if you're testing your kids on the knowledge that you're, on the content you're teaching them, and more than half of the class is failing, you have to be introspective enough to say the way that I taught this material and information did not reach all learners. Now, of course, you're going to have some students who aren't going to thrive, and that's normal. So if you have a class of 30 and 5 kids fail the test, that's probably close to normal in terms of, statistics. But if you have 16 kids that fail the test, then you got to look at how you're teaching that content. So in all seriousness, multi-sensory teaching and learning goes both ways. It's better for the teacher because they don't get bored, and it benefits the students because they're fully understanding the content you're teaching. All right, so the multi-sensory approach that works. I'm always going to cheerlead Orton-Gillingham, and it's because that is how I was trained. That is the gold star standard. There are different avenues to certification. I was classically trained through the academy. Training through the academy is a more rigorous process than other Orton-Gillingham certification routes. So for me, I had to go through my practicum. I had to go through my 60 hours of coursework and my 50 hours of one-on-one and 50 hours of small group, and have, I believe it was 10 or 12 observations from my fellow. And then I had to apply, and I got deferred the first time that I applied. And at that time in the academy, you could only apply twice a year. And so if you applied in January, you wouldn't hear back until July if you got in. And if you didn't get in, then you had to go back and reapply the following year. So, the academy is very picky, and they take things very seriously, as you should, because this is literacy. So, multisensory approaches that work is Orton-Gillingham. Now, what I do want to say is that Orton-Gillingham, it says approach here. It is not a program. If someone is telling you that they are teaching your child with an Orton-Gillingham program, they're probably not truly certified through the academy, or they don't really understand what they're doing. The whole point of Orton-Gillingham is that it's multisensory. There are 12 principles that you can take a look at your leisure on the Orton-Gillingham website. And it really breaks down why Orton-Gillingham works. And one of the top things that I can remember off the 12 principles is it's individualized and it's tailored to the student. Okay, so a program is not tailored. A program is a one-size-fits-all. So if you have a child who is 15 years old and has a difficult time discriminating between their short vowel sounds, and they don't understand digraphs and blends, and they're just throwing things together, you can't just say, well, you're 14, you're in 8th grade, we're going to skip over this and we're going to go to page 62 and this is what we're going to do. No, it doesn't work that way. So you have to find an approach and a methodology, which is Orton-Gillingham, to really understand how to use that with children. And then, of course, you want to throw in that multisensory approach as well. So moving on to structured literacy. So this visual is taken straight from IDA, International Dyslexia Association. And so there are six pillars, I will use the word pillars, or 6 elements, I will say, that work together to have structured literacy be, a success. So you got to have the phonology, you have to have the sound symbol association, you have to have a really good understanding of the 6 syllable types. You have to understand the morphology, understanding that the smallest unit of meaning in language is morphology. You need to understand syntax. And that's really like where you get to the little kids can do this too, but if you have late bloomers, and when I say late bloomers, late diagnosed students with dyslexia, syntax will really start dinging them in middle school, where they have to write, some really structured paragraphs that are 5-6 paragraphs long, or write narratives in English class. So if they don't really understand the basics of a noun-verb agreement, they don't understand how to use commas, they don't understand punctuation, they're really going to struggle. And then the last one is semantics. So all of this goes together. You know, you really think about the whole concept of learning to read. So you teach kids to learn to read, and they need to understand all the different phonemes in a word. They need to be able to blend those sounds together. And then once they do that, and once they master the language, the complicated language that we call English, which there are several patterns and rules, then they read to learn. And so if they don't really have a good understanding of, like I said, commas, periods, punctuation, that's only going to impact their comprehension. And especially if they are not strong, fluent readers, that's really going to impact their comprehension, because they're either reading words one at a time, or they're breaking the phonemes down per word. And by the time they get to an end of a sentence, they're so exhausted, they don't know what they read. So structured literacy is the way to go with our dyslexic learners, because it is pretty much broken out for you to know what this child is missing or needs to strengthen that. All right, so we are going to delve into some multisensory tutorials. Now, I want to preface this by saying that all of these things are things that I created based on the population of kids I worked with. When I taught fourth grade for 3 years, I had a wealth of knowledge working with several teachers who were Orton-Gillingham trained and going through their certification process, or who were already certified. I worked with a fantastic speech language pathologist. I've worked with many great speech language pathologists. I have so much respect for the service providers in the special education world. You know, it's really a team approach. So having said all of that, all of these things were things that I've learned that I adapted to what my kids needed. And this is, you know, I saw results with these. So I'm going to delve into a few tutorials, a few videos. So the first one is going to be about spelling. So I'm going to talk to you, well, you're going to see in the video what that means. We're going to talk about grammar. And so with grammar, there is a program called Framing Your Thoughts. Project Read's Framing Your Thoughts, which is a multi-sensory approach to teaching grammar and writing to kids that have language-based learning differences and struggle. And then also the traditional diagramming. So I don't know where around the world people taught diagramming. I'm sure this is like, you know, all around the world, but in American schools, we don't really do it as much. But I had a phenomenal co-teacher when I worked in public school. And I remember like looking at what he was going to teach these kids. And I was like, there's no way my students will understand this. And I got to tell you, it was like a math problem. I mean, the kids that had the language disabilities actually thrived more than I thought they would, because it was such a structured program. So I will compare the two, FYT, Framing Your Thoughts, and diagramming. Then we'll delve a little bit into writing, and then reading fluency and comprehension. And so I'll have that be, you know, one aimed for the littles, the primary age kids, and one aimed for the secondary kids. So let's get right into it. All right, so we're going to delve into closed syllables. I'm just going to go in order of Clover, as I just showed you in the previous page. So as you saw in the last module, these are the 6 syllable types. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to code closed syllable words. All right. Now I have 4 words here, and I'm going to show you if this were a spelling test from a student, and I said, okay, we have learned what CVC words look like and CCVC words. So that would be digraphs or blends. So I don't have blends here as an example, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. So if this were a spelling test, and typically I didn't give my students no more than 10 words. And if the pattern was really difficult, because I did have some students who got to 2 and 3 syllable words, I would maybe have 8 words. The whole point is mastery. It's not quantity, it's quality. We don't want to give kids 25 words that are just willy-nilly all over the place that follow no pattern, especially for our language-based learning difference children, that's frustrating. So we want to hone in on what the objective is, and the objective is the pattern. So I would always have them write at the top of the spelling test, what is the pattern we worked on this week? So that actually showed me too, where was their mind by Friday? If we were working on closed syllable words, actually I can even be more specific, closed syllable with digraphs. So let's just say I had a student put closed, that's fine, I would give it to them. But if they gave me closed syllable with digraphs, I would definitely know that they really are demonstrating mastery of the skill. So, and actually I'll take it up another level. If they say closed syllables with digraphs, 1 to 2 syllable words, now that's really specific. I would say, man, this kid's gonna get 100%. So this is exactly why it's so important that we delve into what these rules mean, what they look like, how we can teach our kids to read, not to memorize. So the first one is ship. So what I would do is I obviously would not give them the words. I would dictate the word. So let's just say that this is a student who spelled the words correctly. They can't just turn this in. I want to see them code it, because I've had students do that. They say, I know it, I know it, I know it. And then let's say that they coded ship as a blend. Let's say they did this. That would tell me that they haven't really mastered the fact that SH is 2 letters that make one sound. Because if this were a blend, it would say s, ip, sip, s, ip, when really it's sh, ip. So students might think you're tit for tatting them, but it really shows mastery. So I'm going to do this the correct way. I would code it, digraph, breathe. Perfect. Number 2 is catnip. So when we get to multisyllabic words, I want kids to show me where the syllable division line goes. Now, let's just say, because I've had this happen with some students, where I'm going to write the word over here. Let's have catnip. Now let's say that they put the syllable division line here. I wouldn't correct them. I'd say, okay, well let's sound that out. So they would go at ip. And then I would say, okay, so what does this first syllable say? Cat. Now, does that make sense? And depending on their level of where they are with blends, you could take it up a notch and say, have you ever seen NT as a blend? And then they'll probably stop and say no. And then they'll say, oh, wait. Then they might do this. Then you know they're guessing, okay? But you still need to push them and get them to see their errors. So then you say, okay, so what does this syllable say? And they'll say, ah. And then that's when you stop and you say, wait a second here, wait a second. How about we go back? Okay, is this a closed syllable? Is there a consonant closing off that vowel, or is this an open syllable? So you want to make sure you have your rules accessible. And so then they'll say, oh, this is open. And then they might still say, because I've seen this happen, they might still say, ah. And then you're going to say, wait a second, is there a consonant closing that off? Then they'll say, oh, then they'll go back here. And then they'll put the line where it belongs. So then you can say, all right, what is this first syllable? At, cat, it, cat, nip. And that's how you know that they're coding the word correctly. Same thing for tidbit. So I'm not going to go through what I did here, but that could happen here as well. So what is important to know is that these are compound words. And that's a good place to start with closed syllable, multisyllabic closed syllable words, because they can see that this is a word that makes sense on its own, and this is a word that makes sense on its own. So it's closed. And for some kids, they need to see that, because if you break down a word, which you're going to do in later patterns, that one syllable might be open and one syllable might be magic E. And this is exactly why you can't throw in random words for kids and then say, oh, well, this has a closed syllable in it. Well, if they don't understand the basic syllable types, you are just confusing the heck out of them. So tidbit, id, it, tidbit. And then the last one, this demonstrates mastery of this is a digraph, this is a short vowel, this is a digraph. So this is how we would code a closed syllable with digraph, 1 to 2 syllable word spelling test. See you in the next module. All right, so we're going to delve into closed syllables. So I'm just going to go in order of Clover, as I just showed you in the previous page. So as you saw in the last module, these are the 6 syllable types. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to code. All right, so this tutorial is about grammar. So we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. In my experience teaching students with dyslexia and students that have language-based learning differences, it's really important to break down the parts of speech. So you can ask a 4th grader, you can ask an 8th grader, you could probably ask a 12th grader what constitutes a basic sentence. What is a full sentence, right? And without fail, I get, I don't know. And then I usually give them a sentence. So I might say, cat jumps. Is that a sentence? And they'll say, no. Wait, yes. And then they think I'm tricking them. So what I want to point out to you is that there are different ways to demonstrate this. So I'm going to show you in the framing your thoughts approach that I taught kids how to diagram when I taught 4th grade. And then we'll talk about diagramming, which is more for older students as well. But you can definitely do that with your younger students too. So we're going to start with a noun and a verb. So I'm going to have my noun be in blue. So I'm going to put noun. And I'm going to do noun plus verb. Now, verb is going to be green because green means go. And go is an action word. So here's how we're going to break this down. I'm going to give you some noun verb basic sentences. Now, these are caveman talk. That's how I usually break it down. This is a complete sentence. So we can have cat sits, dog eats. Let's do one more. Baby sleeps. Oops, doing it in the wrong color. Baby sleeps. Okay, now we always want to make sure that our complete, our punctuation is good. So always have a period. Now I know I didn't capitalize the first letter in my sentence, but we will focus on that later. So how I would teach this for students to remember, and I have like a hand motion too. We would always say every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a stop sign, but in between that, we would have symbols to represent our bare bones sentences. So for our noun, we would have underline plus a verb. So it's 4 humps. Now the 4 humps in Project Read's Framing Your Thoughts, they all mean something. So that these are different types of verbs, and we'll get into that later, but it's more of like how, when, it's a great way to expand your sentences. But in the interest of this tutorial, we're only going to focus on noun and verb. So if we were to code these sentences, and this is a great way for our language-based learning different students to really take in the information, we would write the sentence out, or we could provide them with these symbols, which I've done that before. So that's when they're kind of a little bit more advanced, where they can just plop in a noun and a verb and they know what I'm looking form. So if we do cat sits, cat sits. So what they would do is they would underline cat, and then they would do our 4 humps for sits. Cat sits. Dog eats. So we're going to underline our noun. We're going to do 4 humps for our verb. Okay, is it starting to make sense? Baby sleeps. Underline our noun. Do our 4 humps for our verb. Now, if we want to demonstrate very early on, which we do, we want to demonstrate punctuation, capitalization, and punctuation. So here's what it would look like. This is the frame. Noun plus verb. 1, 2, 3, 4 humps, period. So if I were to put this in, let's say I'm going to do dog eats. We're going to capitalize our D. Dog. Now, obviously, this is kind of right under here, but you know that the D would go in here. Dog. Oops, I'm so sorry. Eats. Period. And there you go. So that's a good way to teach bare bones sentences. Now, obviously, you can expand your nouns. You can talk about abstract nouns, concrete nouns, plural nouns. There's so many different ways, but we definitely want to start at the basics to build on that so students can understand the parts of speech with grammar. So again, this is a quick tutorial on bare bones sentences using Project Read's Framing Your Thoughts. All right, so this tutorial is about grammar. So we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. In my experience teaching students with dyslexia and students that have language-based learning differences, it's really important to break down the parts of speech. So you can ask a 4th grader, you can ask an 8th grader, you could probably ask a 12th grader. Okay, so the last module showed you basically this side, framing your thoughts. Project Read's Framing Your Thoughts. So I'm going to review this really quickly before we delve into what diagramming looks like. This is essentially the same thing, but Project Read Framing Your Thoughts was geared towards students that have these language-based learning differences. So it's really important to have visuals to go along with the parts of speech. But with diagramming, that is more of an old school approach of how people learned how to really dissect the English language by diagramming. So I will show you that in just a second. So before we do that, let's review. So every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a stop sign. So the punctuation is a stop sign, a period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. In this case, these are pretty basic sentences. Now, what I did was I added an article. I added an article because it'll make more sense when I diagram, because I want you to see that every place has its place when you diagram. So the cat sits. So we have our article, noun, verb. Article, noun, verb. Article, noun, verb. So let me show you here what the diagramming will look like. This is your basic bare bones sentence when you are diagramming. So you have your article coming off the noun and you have your verb. So let's diagram these sentences that are over here to the left. Now, I'm going to just use blue and red. This you really don't need to color code because everything has its own place, and you'll see as we expand. So you always want to start off with a line, boop, and then you want to go right down the center. That's how we start off all of our sentences. And do you know why? Because we always have a noun and a verb, a noun and a verb, a noun and a verb. Now, when I was co-teaching language arts in 8th grade, the 8th graders were so annoyed because my co-teacher, he would go so slowly with noun and verb, and the kids were kind of insulted. And the reason being is because if you can't find the noun and a verb in a very complex sentence, you're going to be pulling random things that may be the direct object, or it may be the adverb, or it may not even be what you're looking for. And as we expanded our sentences, it was obvious that the kids that wanted to move along and add in the adverbs, or add in the indirect objects, or add in the interjections, were actually really frustrated. And so it's so critical to understand you need to be able to identify a noun and a verb. Now, these are very basic sentences. Like I said, there are concrete nouns, there are abstract nouns, there are proper nouns. I mean, there's so many different nouns that it's so important for kids to understand what all of those mean before we start expanding our sentences. So I realized I did not do my diagramming, or coding, I should say, for the framing your thoughts side. Now let me show you what this is going to look like with diagramming. So noun, verb. So cat sits. I'm just going to take cat sits. We're going to go cat sits. Boom. Easy. With diagramming, you don't put periods either. Second sentence, the dog eats. Noun, verb. Third sentence, baby sleeps. Noun, verb. Now you're probably wondering, where are we going to put those articles, right? Well, the article is always going to come off of the noun. So I'm going to tilt my paper. I'm going to tilt my paper, tilt my paper. Okay, now we have the. Now, how would we read this? The cat sits. The dog eats. The baby sleeps. Now, as we expand these sentences and kids add in adjectives, because obviously we want juicy sentences. When we have strong writers are able to have a visual to describe what is the dog eating. Is it mushy? Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? Like, what is the consistency? And those are ways where we expand our sentences. So when we add in adjectives, it's so important for kids to know that an adjective describes a noun, and then an adverb describes a verb. So when we expand and add in adjectives, it's going to come off the noun. When we expand and add in adverbs, it's going to come off the verb. So again, that's a quick tutorial on the differences between framing your thoughts versus diagramming. Both work. It's just a matter of what works for your child. Some kids really need that color coding. Some kids really need to understand that the article is going to be red, or whatever color you want. And the noun is going to be blue, and the verb is going to be green, because I know go means, you know, green is go, and go is an action word. Whatever those connections are, that's the way that you want to tailor it to your learner. So I hope you found this one helpful, and we will delve into expanding these sentences in the next module. Okay, so the last module showed you basically this side, framing your thoughts. Project reads framing your thoughts. So I'm going to review this really quickly before we delve into what diagramming looks like. This is essentially the same thing, but Project Read Framing Your Thoughts was geared towards students that have these learning languages. All right, welcome back. I'm going to show you what it looks like to have two subjects, so two nouns with a conjunction. So what this looks like, as you can see on the left, is framing your thoughts, and everything is color coded. What's on the right is diagramming. So it probably looks a little weird, but I will walk you through it right now. So first things first, mom and dad cook. So let's make sure we have our capitalization and punctuation. So I'm going to do every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends in a stop sign. Every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends in a stop sign. Every sentence starts with a capital letter and ends in a stop sign. Now, for our dyslexic friends, our language-based learning difference friends, they will forget to capitalize letters, or you might find that they are capitalizing letters in the middle of sentences when they don't need to be capitalized. It might seem redundant and it might feel like, why are they not remembering to capitalize? But if you can like make it fun and say, what does every sentence start with? Now, obviously this is for our primary kids. You want to protect the egos of our older friends, but you can still make it in a way where it's not degrading to them and say, hey, I'm noticing what's going on here. And maybe they'll tune in for the older guys. Oh, that's the beginning of the sentence. I got to capitalize that. Now, you can also point out, why is it that Jack is capitalized, but cats is not? And for my older students, they'll say something like, oh, well, it's a name, you know, it's got to be capitalized. And then I'll push them more and I'll say, well, what kind of noun is that? And that's where it will give me information to know, do we need to refresh our memory on proper nouns? So anyway, just a little pre-teaching before the teaching. So mom and dad cook, Carter and Jack run, dogs and cats fight. Now we're going to code this. So we have a noun and a noun. We have a noun and a noun, noun, noun. Let's find our verb, because a full sentence has a noun and a verb. So mom and dad are doing what? They're cooking. Carter and Jack, what? They run. Dogs and cats, what? They fight. Now for our conjunctions for framing your thoughts, it's just 3 little loops. 1, 2, 3, boop, because you're connecting them together. 1, 2, 3, boop. Connecting them together. 1, 2, 3. Simple as that. Now, I highly recommend, depending on your learner, they might need things color-coded. It might feel redundant or some people might say, you're giving them the answer because mom and dad are already in blue, so they're going to know that's the noun. That may not be the case with some students. They might just see it as the word and not really make those connections that blue is always the noun. So if you're finding that your learner is getting it easily, then you maybe write it all in one color. And then you can say, can you identify the nouns in the sentence? Can you identify the verbs? All right, so that's framing your thoughts. Now let's move over to diagramming. So if you remember here, we always want to have a line and a slash, noun, verb. Now, here's an article here for that bare bones sentence. Well, that's really not bare bones because there's an article, but it's always noun, verb. So do you notice that there's a line here? It's the same thing. It's just this looks a little bit funky because we have 2 subjects. So 2 subjects. So we're going to go mom. And this is where you see kids starting to turn papers, and that's totally fine. Mom and dad, what are they doing? They cook. Now, from my experience, the younger guys, and depending on your student, you know, if they have some OT issues with their pincer grip, or if they have dysgraphia and just writing is too arduous, I would highly recommend giving them a skeleton. I have definitely modified this for my 8th graders, where it's funny to kind of see that if you give them the sentence, some could actually tell you the parts of speech, but couldn't do this unless you gave them a skeleton. And once you gave them the skeleton, then they were able to do it. So you really have to cater it to your audience and really ask yourself, what is the objective? Do I want them to know where the parts of speech go? Do I want to test them on everything, give them a blank sentence and say, can you create and place them? So, I mean, you know, this is a learning process, and it's definitely, I think, the best way to teach kids grammar, and also working with kids that have expressive and receptive language disorders. I mean, I had a student a few years ago, actually many years ago, I think he just graduated from high school last year, but I was very concerned when I started co-teaching with my co-teacher who actually taught me diagramming. And I said, I don't really think that, I think this is going to be too much language at once. And as the year unfolded, this student, it was like cracking a code for him. And the more complex the sentences got, I mean, he definitely needed some extended time and some reinforcement and all that, but he was able to find indirect objects and direct objects and adverbs and I mean, really break down these large sentences that I think if we were teaching in a more, I guess this is typically a more traditional way, but most schools don't do this anymore. And it's really a disservice because there are a lot of students who truly don't understand the English language when breaking it down. But let me get off my soapbox. So we have Carter, and I highly recommend students write it as the sentence is. Like, you don't want to do Carter, Jack, and. That's not what the sentence says. Carter and Jack run. So I'm going to do my skeleton again. Boop, 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 boop. Food, line, verb. We have dogs and cats, right? And there you have it. Framing your thoughts to the left, diagramming sentences on the right. So remember, these are still kind of pretty basic sentences. These are just 2 nouns and 1 verb. So I will show you now what 2 nouns and 2 verbs look like. I'm sure you probably can figure that out. All right, welcome back. I'm going to show you what it looks like to have 2 subjects, so 2 nouns with a conjunction. So what this looks like, as you can see on the left, is framing your thoughts and everything is color-coded. What's on the right is diagram. All right, so this is a way to show how writing can be fun. So I taught a multisensory writing course many years ago during the summer to elementary school kids who really struggled with processing, getting ideas on paper, whether it was a processing issue, an ADHD issue, a dysgraphia issue. Kids can write, you just have to give them the tools. And I will say, just giving kids, quote, graphic organizers is not always efficient or helpful. Some of these kids, especially kids with the specific learning disabilities such as dyslexia and dysgraphia and you know, the language-based learning difference brain really needs structured ways to break things down. So this is a quick way. This is inspired by Diana Hamberry King. So when I taught in private dyslexic schools, we used her writing program, which was awesome because it was a great way to kind of simplify writing, and then you can have kids expand. So the first thing I would do is I would say, for the interest of this tutorial, I'm going to say, let's jot down all the things that are green. So our topic is all things green, right? So really, depending on what you're doing, if you're teaching kids to learn to love to write, you want to choose something that's simplistic, because what you want to teach them, especially with the elementary school age kids, you want to actually teach them how to write. You don't want to assume that they understand the syntax and the grammar and the punctuation and the spelling. I mean, that is a lot all encompassing. We want to give them that celebrated feeling of, I know the first step. So the topic, all things that are green. So now you have kids brainstorm. So depending on where the kids are, what I would do is I would do this as a class and I'd model it. If I'm tutoring and if I know that this child really struggles with getting their thoughts on paper, I would scribe. So maybe you take 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, you jot down things that are green. Grass, frogs, money. You might get some crazy stuff like St. Patrick's Day. I could say marker, because this marker is green. Pen, grass. Oh, I already have grass, and you might have that too. So as you can see, I am just brainstorming. So depending on where you are and what you're doing, maybe you might give a timer, maybe you don't. Maybe you'll find that a kid only has 2 things, and then maybe you give them a few other things to think about. Remember, at this point in the process, it's more of teaching them how to write. So let's just say this is step 1. List all things that are green. Now, step 2, you want them to find 3 things that they can expand on. So that's all we're focusing on right now. What's something that you feel you can really expand on? And when I mean expand, you can write about it. Well, I can write about money. Cool. I can write about a pen. Awesome. I can also write about St. Patrick's Day. Boom, 3 things. 1, 2, 3. So in theory, these are 3 paragraphs. Okay, so that's the first step right there. List all things that are green, give them some time, then they choose what are 3 things that they can actually write about. So then we move on and we focus on what are our 3 things? 3 things green. So we have money. We have St. Patrick's Day. And we also have a pen. So this is where we introduce really basic concepts of opening and closing sentences. So we might start off by having a template. Now I know when kids get to secondary school, I worked with a co-teacher in 8th grade, and he really despised this paragraph is about things that are green. And yes, in theory, that's not great writing. But when you are learning how to write and the structure of writing, all of those things will come over time. You will learn how to add in adjectives and adverbs, and you'll understand parts of speech and why this sentence is more robust than a basic one. But right now, the sole purpose is, how do we teach writing to kids who really struggle with writing and don't know where to go? So step 2, we are listing. So just to recap, we start off with, here's the topic, all things that are green. So you want to write down whatever is in that child's mind. What are all things that are green? Now this could be any topic. Things to do in the summertime, favorite desserts, favorite candy, whatever it is, make it simple so they can feel confident about it. So things that are green. So now we want to brainstorm. Actually, I'm sorry, let's take a step back from the opening sentence. We want to brainstorm and expand these out. So let's just say, I have money, St. P Day, and then pen. Boom, boom, boom. Can we elaborate on these? Let's expand them out. So what do we know about money? People spend it. We need it. It's green. It's currency. Okay, so those are some things that we know about money. What do we know about St. Patrick's Day? I'm trying to think, what is that little, I can't remember what the little, we know that, well, for me, when I think of St. Patrick's Day, I think of everything being green. Everything green. Now, obviously, a kid should not be writing this, but I think of green beer. I think of parties. I think of shamrocks. I think of rainbows. I think of Lucky Charms. Okay, so as you can see, this is getting ideas on paper. What do we know about a pen? Different types. We know that a pen writes. We know that a pen has many colors. Okay, so I am demonstrating, and obviously you shouldn't put all 3 of these on the same paper, but in the interest of this tutorial, I'm showing you how you can expand ideas from these topics. So now what you do is, ideally, this is a paragraph, this is a paragraph, this is a paragraph. So how this would work is, you would then say, we would have opening paragraph, And then paragraph 1, I'm going to do the paragraph symbol. Paragraph 1 is about money. Paragraph 2 is about St. Patrick's Day. Okay, then we might have paragraph 3 is about a pen. Then we would have a closing paragraph. Okay. See how simple this is? We don't need like fancy, cool graphic organizers for this. I mean, this is like so simple. If you know how to guide your child through this, you can scribe for them, they can type it up. I mean, this is not hard. As long as it's basic and as long as it's a topic, what are your favorite sports? Basketball, hockey, football. Boom, expand on it. Okay, so to keep this simple, you would then give your child or student opening paragraph starters. So what you would do is you would have, oops. Okay, so for opening paragraph, you would have opening sentence, outline, things that are green, and why they're important, outline things that are green and why you chose them, or why they're important, whatever it is. And then you'd have closing sentence. Okay, then you would have paragraph 1. This one's about money, right? So you would have opening sentence, and then this is where you go back here and we choose 3 details. So maybe we say people spend it, you need it, it's currency. So you're gonna then put in your 3 details, right? So opening sentence, give and explain 3 details, closing sentence. And you rinse and repeat for paragraph 2 and 3. So maybe for paragraph 2, you go back and you're like, oh, I want to talk about how there are so many parties on St. Patrick's Day and the Shamrocks, and I really want to talk about Lucky Charms. Because maybe you get to your list and you're like, I don't really know what I can say about green beer. I don't even know what green beer is, and I'm too young to drink. You don't write about it then. You write about something else you brainstorm here that you know you can actually talk about. And let's say here, I only have 3 things. Does that mean that I'm only stuck with those 3 things? No, maybe I just need more think time about a pen. Or maybe, because I've been here too, where students are like, actually, I realize I can't write about a pen. So then what do? We go back to our list. Maybe you want to write about grass. As a matter of fact, maybe you just got a pet frog and you want to write about that. Boom. Then you pull out ideas on that. So you go back and you do that. So going back to this, it's the same structure for every single paragraph. Opening sentence. So this is opening paragraph. Opening sentence, you outline what you're going to tell your audience about and why, and then you have a closing sentence. Opening sentence, you give what the 3 things are that relate to money and why they're green or anything about money. And then you give 3 details on closing sentence. And then, of course, after all 3 paragraphs, you want to have a closing paragraph. So I'm going to put paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and then we have closing. Closing paragraph, you have opening sentence, summarize 3 main topics. and then closing sentence. Sorry for the messy handwriting, guys. Okay, that's our outline. So now you're probably wondering, like, well, my kid doesn't really understand what an opening sentence is. Well, there is a resource tool at the bottom of this module for you to use. You can be as simple and as complex as you want to be, depending on where your child is. But I would highly advise, because the whole point of this is to give them the confidence and the structure, that practicing this is very helpful for them. And this is like low tech. You don't need to find some crazy graphic organizers on like Teachers Pay Teachers. You can just utilize a very simple method and structure. And then also too, definitely use the adjective reference sheet too, because I have found in my experience working with kids that have language-based learning differences, they will constantly use words like good or bad. Well, it's not so black and white, and we want to definitely expand our vocabulary and use those $20 words. So that is one way to make writing fun in a very low tech way that really gets things going. All right, so this is a way to show how writing. All right, so let's say that we want to isolate and only focus on, let's say we're doing digraph QU and WH. Well, this is a great tool to just practice decoding skills. We can practice our fluency. I always like to play games, so I'll, say we're going to do some OG detective skill work. So depending on where the child is, depending on where you are in the lesson, I mean, a lot of this really is tailored to the student. So maybe we'll just read, 3 words. Maybe I'll say, okay, you get to pick any 3 words on this page from here up, and then they choose their 3, and then we, write them down, and then they decode them. Or maybe I say, okay, read the word and give me the sounds. Or can you only find digraph QU on this page? Whatever it is, make it fun. So in this case, I might say, let's find all the QU digraph words. So then they're going to go boom, 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 here, 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 here. Well, you sit on the page, so I'm going to go down here. Okay, and then while because usually I give them some fun activity while I'm like going over their work and grading it, not really grading it for a grade, but reviewing where I need to do some error repairs. And then I say, okay, close your eyes. I'm gonna point and read me this word. And I point. And so I'm gonna say, okay, what does this word say? And they're gonna say, quick. And I'm going to say, okay, give me all the sounds. Ah, and I'm going to say, okay, you said quick. What vowel is this? A. What sound does that make? Ah. Is ah the same sound as it? No. So what does this word say? Quack. And so depending on where they are, you play with that. You give them a little bit of praise. You give them some prompting questions, depending on where you are. Maybe you've taught them digraph CK. Maybe you ask them what that jingle is. So there's so many different ways that you can use what looks like a very boring page. You can make it a lot of fun. So I'm going to actually show you what you can do with the fluency. So again, depending on the student, I had students where they see 3 sentences on a piece of paper and they have a panic attack. You need to cater this to your child or your student. So maybe what you might do, if seeing all this is overwhelming to the eye, and also, it's kind of like if someone gives you the Cyrillic alphabet and it's a paragraph in Russian, you might freak out because you're like, I have no idea where to start. You want to chunk it. You want to accommodate and have it be sizable in a way where it's digestible. So maybe you take this last sentence down here and you put it on a little strip of paper. And so maybe depending on where they are in the lesson, they might be really tired, but you still want to hear the fluency. Maybe you say, can you find all of the digraphs in the sentence? So again, if you're giving them a general statement of find all of the digraphs, you should have already taught them all of the digraphs. So that would be SH, TH, QU within this sentence. And then you might say, all right, well, let's practice reading this sentence. And so let's say they read it, I wish that I had quiz. So as you can tell, that was very choppy. So you want to definitely give them that flow. I wish that I had the quiz. And so sometimes I might do a little scoot loop. So they know, like, I actually have to get this in one breath. I have to get that in one breath, because the whole point is fluency. The choppier the sentences are, they're not fluent, and then that really impacts them with their reading comprehension. Okay, so that is a good example of how you can use these pages for fun and use words in isolation. So I'm going to find a story. I'm going to just go to the bash. So perhaps they did really well with just those 1 or 2 sentences, and you want to beef it up and let them know that they can tackle a paragraph. Obviously, it has to fit within that pattern. This looks like it's appropriate. I see a lot of closed syllable words. I see some digraphs. So you want to make sure that they're reading. Now, what I usually do here is I let them read. So if it's choppy, it's choppy. If they say Ted is made at Liz and Laz is made at Tad, let them read. You write down on your end, what are the errors? And then what I do is, depending on their mood and depending on if they feel very proud of themselves, you praise them. You say, I love how you pushed through and read this entire paragraph. How did you feel about that? Because you want to get that self-esteem up, right? But then you want to also go back and realize if the student is saying made and you haven't taught magic E, then don't worry about that right now, because you don't want to confuse them. You want to go back to why this is a closed syllable. You want to review, what do we know about a closed syllable? And you want to have them reread this correctly. And let's say, I can't remember what the other one was I said. Oh, let's say this one is Tad. You want to put down on a piece of paper or a whiteboard or whatever you're tutoring or supporting your child with, you want to put down 2 words. Now, let's say you haven't even introduced, well, actually, I guess if you've already done short E, you should have already done A. So you want to go through and see if they can see the difference. Now, seeing the difference and hearing the difference are 2 different things. And that might be something that if you're struggling with and which those don't sound as similar, they should be able to eventually hear it. They'll realize, oh, it's actually Ted. Now, it's also not uncommon for kids to keep butchering the same name over and over again. And that lets you know that they're not really decoding what's there. They're just pulling from whatever their memory is or what they think it is, and they need to slow down. And that's where that direct, explicit instruction goes back to, okay, in this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentence paragraph, they had 19 words wrong. You need to look at what they had wrong and why. So here's a good example here. Pals, right? Well, to you and me, that sounds pretty simple. So pals. Well, let's say they said pal. Liz and Don were just pal. Well, maybe you haven't taught suffix ending S. Maybe they don't realize they have to add that on. Maybe they don't know that they need that there. Maybe they're not understanding that pals with that Z sound, first of all, the sound is different from S. And pals implies plural, which means more than one. So if they're not understanding Liz and Don are 2 people, they're not really going to comprehend that pals should be pals. So it's all those kinds of things to really think about in terms of language, where you're not just getting your kid to decode and be fluent. Like, you want them to really understand all of the 6 components of structured literacy. All right, I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you in the next module. All right, so I'm going to cut that off, mostly because that is, all of those videos were in my multi-sensory tutorial. So there are about 23 videos of those, kind of walking you through all the different syllable types, as you heard me talking about nonsense words. So if you are interested in that, that is something that you can purchase on my Think Dyslexia app. But I do want to talk about some resources. So as you can tell, there are so many ways to engage learners. There are so many ways to get them to think differently, to get them to really unpack the structure of like, why does this work? How do we get the brain to be rewired in the sense of using that multisensory approach? So Think Dyslexia has many resources that I want to share with you before we end this presentation. So the first one is I will be having a Dyslexia Mom Boss podcast that will premiere in July. So that is just around the corner. I am so excited. This is a holistic approach to the dyslexia journey. So because I am a mom and, an educator, I view things from the lens that is, different from, let's say, a male or a male educator. So I definitely bring that holistic approach of the marathon. What do I call it? The marathon called motherhood, and all of the things that we need to do to pour into ourselves to be the best version of ourselves, to be able to advocate and support our children along their journey. So if this sounds like something for you, definitely tune in and subscribe to the podcast. I'm very excited about this. So you will walk away feeling empowered. I always give tips and tricks. I always, I'm a straight to the point kind of person. So there's no fluff, but Dyslexia Mom Boss podcast. So that is a free resource for you. The next one is I also have Dyslexia, Orton-Gillingham tutoring packages. So I am running my summer tutoring specials now because it is the summer before school starts. And here in the States, kids don't go back to school until August, mid to late August, early September. So if you feel that your child needs some extra TLC and structured literacy and writing and things of that nature, you can always do a free consultation with me, and we will go from there, and I will see what package fits your needs. And other supports, as you know, so Think Dyslexia is a tutoring / educational consulting company. So we support, parents, teachers, and we are, in the near future, we'll be partnering with school districts to really give a little bit of understanding about the D cubed, as I say, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So if you are a parent wanting support, needing some consulting around what does this journey look like, where can I go, kind of like someone who is your North Star, you can always set up a free consultation, and we will, navigate that space to really see what your needs are. Teacher coaching programs. I mean, this could range from, I don't know anything about these language-based learning differences. Where do I start? To, I have a little bit of an idea, but I need some support with my lesson plans, or I'm not really quite sure how to differentiate, or, I'm noticing my students that have these learning differences have really low self-esteem. What do I do? I mean, really anything. And so what I usually do is I hop on free consultation calls, and we go from there. So if this is something that you feel like you need, or something that really intrigues you, be sure to go to my website, and you can definitely type in that you want to consult, and we will go from there. Or you can directly email me, and I will send you my calendar. So if you are not following me, I am on Instagram. So I have a new account. Before it was Think Dyslexia, but now it is the Dr. Lauren, and you can find me there. Follow me. I have a whole bunch of content that's already out there for you to dive into. So there's my website. You can get your free downloadables, 3 surprising ways to support your child's dyslexia journey. And before we cut out, I absolutely want you on my mailing list. So please be sure to get that QR code on your phone and to get on my mailing list. So that is the end of the presentation. I definitely want to say thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you found it very useful, and be sure to reach out if you need anything. Thanks again.